That was beautiful. Our speaker today will be Lieutenant Commander Ron May. Commander May.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Survivors of the USS Indianapolis, families of survivors, fellow members of the armed forces, friends, and guests. Last year, while I was serving on active duty, I made a trip to the island of Guam. While there, I visited a museum just outside the gate of the naval station. There, hanging from the top of that museum, were two very long banners that were from the roof all the way down almost to the ground. One of those banners had the picture of the USS Indianapolis. It was an interesting experience for me to remember just how far the USS Indianapolis and her crew had been. Guam is 8,000 miles away from this city of Indianapolis, and yet I felt closer to you there than at any other time since. The reason, I think, becomes apparent as we remember the important role that Guam had for your ship's history and for each of you as well. The island of Guam was the last piece of land that the USS Indianapolis saw. It was the last of a piece of ground that could be touched or smelled or seen before that fateful journey toward Leyte Gulf, Philippines, where the USS Indianapolis was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine and sank. The USS Indianapolis had arrived on the island of Guam on Friday, July 27, 1945, after having left the island of Tinian the night before to drop off parts of the atomic bomb. Your ship steamed away through the night to reach SINCPAC headquarters in Guam to receive your next mission. It was there that your captain, Charles McVeigh, received orders to proceed east to Leyte Gulf, Philippines to conduct training for the preparation of the invasion on the mainland of Japan, expected to happen in the next 6 months. Your stay in Guam was very short. Just 24 hours. I don't even know if you had a chance to get off the ship. Probably not. But you were there. You saw the land, you smelled the land, you gazed at the mountains surrounding that beautiful island, and I trust that for a few hours, you felt like you were close to home. That might seem like a strange statement to others that aren't familiar with the history of Guam, an island that's 6,000 miles away from the western coast of the United States. And yet, it is a place of home. The island of Guam was then, and is still today, a United States territory. This westernmost territory had been part of the United States since 1898, when it was surrendered to the U.S. by Spain in the Treaty of Paris. Guam was the only U.S. territory to be occupied by the Japanese, taking place one day after the attack on Pearl Harbor. But U.S. troops recaptured the island in 1944. And, as fate would have it, your ship, the USS Indianapolis, was the first ship to enter the harbor of Guam after it had been freed from Japanese occupation. It was as if God, knowing that your ship would never again reach the continental United States, allowed her to be the first one to taste victory and celebrate freedom in the only home territory that had been occupied. So you see, Guam was not just an island. It was a taste of home and an experience of victory for freedom. Your ship left Guam on July 28th, just 24 hours after it had arrived. And tragically, less than 48 hours later, your ship was sunk and hundreds of your shipmates were dead and dying. Those of you who survived at sea, many of you, if not all of you, I'm not sure, were taken back to Guam to recover and then to begin your long journey back to your home continent, back to your families and friends that you had left behind, back to a homecoming. But tragically, most of your shipmates would not come back home, could not come back home. Almost 900 plus descended to the depths of a watery grave somewhere between Guam and the Philippines. And together with their ship, they never made it home. But you have not allowed them to be forgotten. You have gathered here today, as you have so often in the past, to remember them, to pay tribute to their sacrifice, and to honor them and those that have died since then. I think one of the best ways to honor them is not only to remember their sacrifice and the tragedy of that ship's sinking and of their deaths in the sea, but to celebrate their love for and devotion to home. For while it is indeed tragic that they never made it home, they did not die with home far from them. For home was with them. Home was inside of them. As they, and I think all of you, discovered by being so far away from home, war can take a man far from his home, but war cannot easily take a home far away from a man. As the well-known quote reminds us, home is where the heart is. And the hearts of your shipmates were home. And what is this home that was in their hearts? More than just a house that they grew up in, more than a school they attended, or a church that they were a member of, more than a community that they belonged to, more even than a nation that they lived and died for. Home was the people that they loved, the family that they had, the values that they held dear, and the God that they trusted in. This was home. God had created them just as He created all of us for an experience of home. When He put the first man, Adam, and the first woman, Eve, together into the Garden of Eden, He created a home, a family, from which children would come, from which memories would be made, from which values would be shared, from which faith in God would be passed on. This was the real experience of home. And the blessing of living in this country is the blessing to freely establish homes where we wish and with whom we wish. I believe that each of you experienced that reality, even though you served far away from home, far from loved ones and far from communities. In fact, it was your love for home and your experience with home that motivated you and empowered you to go into harm's way, to protect your own home and the homes of all other citizens in this great country within the blessing of freedom. It was home that you left, but it was also home that you took with you to the Pacific. Home that you took with you to Guam. Home that you took with you even into the sea on that tragic night of your ship's sinking. Because home is what you had been experiencing all along. Home is what you talked about with your buddies. Home is what your photos reminded you of that you kept in your wallet or under your helmet. Home is what you dreamed of at night before you went to sleep. You see, home was never far from any of you. This then is the great paradox, and the great comfort in the midst of a tragedy that we come together to commemorate once again. For while many of your shipmates did not and could not make it home, home was never really ever taken away from them. Just as they lived their life with home, so they died their death with home. Home in their minds and home in their hearts. They lived for home. They died for home. And they died with home. So what does all of this have to do with you survivors today, some 65 years after the sinking of your ship? What does it have to do with those that are gathered here to witness and to honor those fallen with you? What does it mean for a generation or generations after you, which continue to receive the gift of freedom that you fought to preserve? I think it means quite a bit. Because I think your experience and the experience of your shipmates have taught us an important lesson and given us strength and courage and hope in a world where we are often forced to leave home. And even if we don't ever serve in the armed forces, we all experience the effects of being torn away from home. It's just part of the aging process as we grow up and eventually leave our families, leave our parents, as we start homes of our own, as jobs make us move around the country, as children then that we raise grow up and leave us, as age and sickness come and perhaps even force us to leave the house that we love. We're constantly seeing the effects of having to leave home. But your story, your shipmates, testify to this important truth. No matter how far you may be from home, 6,000, 8,000, 10,000 miles, no matter what extreme tragedy you may experience, no matter where death may come or how, the truth is, you are never far from home. You carry it within you, and you can and one day will experience that truth, that home journeys with you wherever you go. Thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for taking the time to remember and help us remember your fallen shipmates. And thank you for teaching us that in spite of miles and in spite of death and tragedy that may befall us, always, in life and in death, we can be close to home. God bless you, your families, our country, and God bless the homes that we always carry with us. Thank you.